Alright, so welcome to Model Monday. Today we have a machining project in front of us here. Because like I was just saying, I backed a Kickstarter project and it came in the mail today. It has been a year of waiting for this thing to arrive. So we may or may not have more CNC projects in the future. I may or may not make you suffer along with me. All right. But this is, you may recognize this pattern as the cheese grater pattern, they call it, from the front of a MacBook Pro or a Mac Pro. So I think it's kind of a cool pattern. It's kind of interesting. And we can make it parametric for whatever kind of material thickness we have. So, that being said, let's jump in. I'm going to start a new document. Alright, so I am going to start by making a couple of parameters, because I think it'll be helpful for us to have these right off the bat. To make your own user parameters, you go to Modify, and then you scroll down to Change Parameters. And we are going to make two user parameters. So I'm going to click the little plus button to add a user parameter there. And this first one is going to be called material. And it's just the thickness of whatever material we end up using. So I'm going to start with 1/2 inch. And I'm going to leave myself a nice note here. It's the thickness, or maybe we should say it's the final thickness of the material, because we may, when you're milling something down, you may start with a material that's thicker than 1/2 inch, but face it down to be 1/2 inch, so it's the final thickness of that material. And then I'm going to say OK, and then I'm going to make one more user parameter, and I'm just going to call this my offset, because we need to have a value that we can use to push or pull things around without having to change 15 different things, kind of push or pull all things at the same time. And I think I made this 1/8 inch to start off with. And what we'll end up doing is, well, I'm going to leave the comment blank. I'm having second guesses about leaving the comment blank, because usually that's a bad idea, right? Like, future me is not going to know what offset means, and then future me is going to look at past me like I'm an idiot, because I am. Small amount to push and pull the spheres around. It's just like a value that we can use to shift things. What's kind of nice too is we can say OK here, and then we can use these in our drawing, and then we get to the end of our drawing, and you might go, oh dude, this is what you should write in the comments, because this is what it's doing. We can come back and we can change that comment. But for now, I'm going to say OK. Alright, so I'm going to create myself a sketch. So let's click on our Create menu. I'm going to come down and say, hey, we're going to create a sketch. I'm going to draw on the top plane. When we're going to do things, or when we know we're going to do things that are going to be cut on a CNC machine, it helps to orient things right away in the right direction. So like your tool by default is kind of like perpendicular to the Z, parallel to the Z-axis here. So if we draw on our top, our plane in between our green and our red axis, kind of like a top-down kind of thing, then we'll kind of orient things in the right direction right off the bat. It'll save us a little step when we actually go to generate some G-code here. All right, so now let's start by creating a polygon. We're going to make a circumscribed polygon. So we'll create polygon, circumscribed polygon, and I'm going to create the center of that polygon in the center of my drawing world. You know, I like to have things fully constrained. So that means constrained in dimension and in location. And the only way to do that at the beginning of things is to constrain things right to the origin there. And then the size of this, I'm imagining this being like a coaster, a cheese grater style coaster, or trivet, I guess, one of those two. So let's make it like 2 1/4.
So it's circumscribed?
Yeah, circumscribed. So that means that there's a circle on the inside of this that kind of is tangent to all 6 sides of our circle. The other type of polygon is an inscribed polygon. And an inscribed polygon would refer to the distance between the furthest point and the center. So like if we draw the circle around the outside, touching all the points, that would be an inscribed polygon. And 6 sides is indeed what is good for us. And I'm going to hit enter. All right, cool. So let's, in the center of that circumscribed polygon, concentric on that center, let's draw a center diameter circle. So this center diameter circle is going to be concentric on our center circumscribed polygon, so it's also going to be right at our origin. And here's where we can start driving our sketch with our parameters that we entered. So we want our circle to have a diameter of our material times 2 minus our offset. So it's the material, and the multiplication is the star, so it's above the 8. It's like
so the material and then star, no space.
Correct, yeah, no spaces. So it's the material times 2 minus our offset. So if the offset in this case is like the thickness of the material that's left over at the end. Maybe I'll wait to describe this until the end, what that offset actually does. And then we'll be able to push and pull it around. Cool? Yeah, so the material times 2 minus the offset. And that gives you a 0.875 in this particular instance, with our material and our offset the way it is. But even though it says it solves that problem for you, you can double click on it and it brings you back to your equation here. You can also, in these equations, you can enter in parentheses here if you want to. Like if you want to control the order of the operations, so if you want to multiply this first and then subtract, I think multiplication always comes first anyway in order of operations. It is not a necessity. It is not a necessity in this case, but there are cases when you want to force it to do one thing before the other, but that's not the case here. We don't need it to do one thing before the other. All right, and then I'm going to hit enter. Now we need to draw some lines. So we are eventually, or we're going to make a pattern using this circle, and we're going to make a rectangular pattern, but in a rectangular pattern you can define the axes that you're going to make your pattern in, and we want to do that now. So we want to create a couple of lines that we will in our next step use to define the direction of our rectangular pattern takes. So from the create menu, let's grab our line tool, and I'm going to draw two lines, one from the center point over to this corner in the right upper side there, right-ish quadrant, and then one that goes straight up to the top. And I'm going to make both of those lines construction lines because I don't want them to divide up my shape. So I'm going to click on the line, and I can hit the X key on my keyboard, or I can click on the line and I can hit change the line type in my sketch palette over there. Over in the sketch palette, we can click that little construction button there, and that'll turn into a construction line. And that way that shape is no longer bisected by those lines there. Next, we're going to, from our create menu, choose that rectangular pattern option. So we'll say create rectangular pattern. I'm going to make a rectangular pattern of our circle. And now you can see by default it gives you these two arrows. But we also have a select button over here. And this select button will let us choose the directions that we want our rectangular to be in. And that's our two construction lines that we drew. It's kind of a weird name to call it a rectangular pattern because we're definitely not making a pattern that is a rectangular shape right now. This is just a pattern. It's just the pattern tool, man. Don't put labels on things, man. Don't put my pattern in a rectangular in a box. Alright. So we're going to make a pattern, and here again we want to make this parametric. So we want to drive things, we want to drive everything by the parameters that we chose. So I've got my distribution type set to spacing, because we want to control the spacing between each one of these. I only need to make a pattern of 2 in this case. And the distance, the spacing distance here, we're going to drive with that parameter that we made, which was our material times 2. And we're going to do that same distance for both of the directions. So it's the material times 2. Alright, and we're going in one direction. Happiness?
So far.
So far, so good. I'm going to go ahead and say okay. Alright, so the only reason that we have made this pattern is because the only way I could figure out how to find a point that we need. So we're going to draw a circular pattern on this side, or we're going to make a circular pattern on this side. We want to make the same circular pattern on the other side, but it needs to be offset. So the center of the circle is now at the center where this triangle is here. So the only way that I could figure out to do this as I was kind of prepping here is I'm going to draw a triangle connecting these dots. So I'm going to grab actually, let's try to make a triangle. I wonder if we can do that.
What about the circle thing? The tangent circle?
Oh, that's a great idea. Can we make a circle that just hits those 3 points?
3 tangent circles.
I've never tried to make a tangent circle with points before. Does that work? Can I? No, I can't click the points. But I don't need to, right? So if I go and say, hey, I want to make a center diameter circle. Great idea. I love it. Oh wait, there's a 3-point circle. Creates a circle defined by 3 points. That's exactly what we want to do. So yeah, in circle, if we click 3-point circle, specify the 3 points on the circumference of the circle. The points define the size and position of the circle. Love it. So if I choose that point, and that point, and that point, yeah, beautiful. Let's make that circle a construction line. Because we really just need the center point, and we just need the center point for the other side when we eventually draw the other side. Okay, cool. The last thing that we need to do here is we need a line that divides this center circle in half. So the kind of the way that I've been doing these when I need to do this is I grab my line tool and I draw a line that is definitely not down the middle of this circle. But I do have my horizontal vertical constraint popping up, so the thing that I know about, there are 3 things that I know about this line. I know that it is always going to be connected to the top, to this circle up here. It is always going to be connected to the circle down here, because I've got that little blue X. And it is always going to be straight horizontal. So those are the kind of the 3 things that I know about this line that I'm drawing right here. Now I can click and drag on this line. In theory, I should be able to click and drag on that line, but it won't let me for some reason. There we go. I click and drag on the line, and those 3 rules that I was telling you, I can verify that they're true, right? So it's staying straight up and down, and it's staying connected at the top and staying connected at the bottom. But I want it to go right through the center. So I'm going to take this line here, and I'm going to add a coincident constraint. So from the constraints menu, if I choose this coincident constraint, and I pick the line that I want to be coincident to, and the point that I want it to be coincident to, Now I get a line that perfectly divides the circle in half. Sometimes what I would do is I would like draw a line from the center point down and make sure the line is straight horizontal, and then I would draw another line from the center point up and make sure that's straight horizontal, but now it's just one line. Many ways to skin a cat, but that is the method that I've been using recently. All right. Questions so far? Cool. Cool. All right. I'm going to say finish sketch. So now let's extrude out our shape. So from our create menu, let's go ahead and grab the extrude tool. We're going to extrude everything. So I'm just going to like box select this whole thing. And we are going to extrude this. I want to extrude it away from myself because I want to have this sketch. I guess it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. As long as we draw our sketch on the next sketch we're going to draw, as long as we draw it on the opposite side of this body that we're making, then we're good. And our body is going to be a thickness of material. We're making it a new body. And again, it doesn't really matter which, if you put negative, you can go a negative material or you can go a positive material. Either one is fine. And then I'm going to say OK. All right, so let's create our funky pattern on this side before we flip it over and do the other side. So from our create menu, let's go ahead and grab the revolve tool. The profile that we are going to revolve is going to be half of our circle to be cut in half. And the axis that we're going to revolve it around is our line that we use to cut that thing in half. And here, I can look at this sideways now, and you can kind of see this distance here, this is our offset. So if we would have gone and done just the material times 2, this circle would come down and be tangent to the other side of the material, and we want that little bit of thickness spacing left in there. So that's our kind of like number that we can play with to make that thinner or thicker. All right, and I'm going to say we're making a cut. Are you good?
You just lost me.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, here. So,
Hang on, I have the bottom of the thing.
So then we go to create, and then revolve.
Create, revolve, fine.
And then I pick half of my circle.
It's not. Okay. An axis.
And then the axis is going to be that line that divides our circle in half.
Okay.
And then as long as we're cutting, then we can say okay. Cool? Cool. So now we can use that shape to create our pattern. So We can create a pattern. We've created 2D patterns a lot before, but we can create patterns in the 3D environment too. And it is definitely my preference to use the pattern tool out here in 3D land versus using the pattern tool in 2D land, because when I use the pattern out here in 3D land, I get an icon that appears down in my timeline. And when I can make an icon appear down there, then it gives me something that I can edit later, because I'm definitely going to change my mind. It's just how it works, right? So if I can do things that are going to give me points down here in my timeline that I can control later, then I would always choose to do it that way. So from our Create menu, I'm going to grab my Pattern tool. Again, it's the rectangular pattern tool. We are making a pattern that is an object type of features. A feature are the things that are down here in our timeline. So this is our feature timeline down here at the bottom. Down here at the bottom is our feature timeline here. And you can attempt to pick the feature by hovering your mouse over your drawing view out here and trying to highlight the feature that you're going to click on. You might have to like hide your sketch in order to do that. But I prefer to pick the feature in the timeline down here. So I want to make sure I'm picking a feature down here. Sometimes when you pick a feature out here, you may not be picking all the features. You may just be picking some faces of the feature. And so I prefer to pick the feature that I'm making a pattern of down in the feature timeline down here. And then I'm going to turn my sketch back on because I need to see these lines, our construction lines that we made, because we're going to use them again as the axes that we're making our pattern in. So if I click on axes, axes, and I choose those two lines as the two construction lines as the thing that I'm making my pattern in a direction of. Again, our pattern distribution type is set to spacing as opposed to extent. And then we want to be parametric about this, so the same way we made our pattern to begin with, where we set a distance that is based on our material times 2. And that is going to be the distance for both directions of both our axis 1 and our axis 2. Now right now, this pattern is kind of shooting off towards the one side. And we actually want to make the pattern over this whole thing here, over the whole kit and caboodle. So we're in the direction for each axis. So we set a quantity, we set a distance, and we can set a direction for each axis. Our direction is going to be symmetric for both of these. And that way, it'll kind of expand out our pattern outward as we add more quantity. So I think I have to go up to 5 on both of these. And then that covers my shape.
You hit the suppression button.
I did not. I actually don't know what that checkbox does. What does that checkbox do?
That lets you turn off some of the examples.
Oh, cool. Hey, we should do that. Because, you know what, we don't really need these out here. we don't really need these out here either. In fact, maybe we want to try to avoid making little cuts away. I've never done that before. I've never even noticed that suppression checkbox over there. Neat. I'm learning stuff today. You guys could come up here and teach. And then if I say okay, I will mention before I say okay, sometimes when you're making a pattern and you click OK and you go back and you look and you're like, where the heck did the pattern go? I can't exactly tell you what this compute type does, but I can tell you that sometimes when the pattern fails, if you still get an icon down here that it thinks it succeeded, it like makes you a little pattern icon, but the pattern doesn't actually show up, you can come back and try changing your compute type from adjust to something else, to like optimized or identical. Sometimes just changing the compute type will make your pattern successful if it fails. But it worked for me. Hopefully it's working for you guys too. 2 thumbs up. Cool. All right, so now let's make this pattern on the other side. So I'm going to rotate my body around so I'm looking at the side of my shape that does not have a pattern on it. There's no pattern on this side, there's no sketch on this side. And from my create menu, I'm going to create a sketch. So we're going to say create sketch. I'm going to create my sketch on this opposite face. So I'm going to just create it right on the face here. And I need to bring over some geometry from the other sketch onto this sketch. Primarily and only this point that we made that is in the middle of our little triangle of our three pattern circles over here. So from the create menu, I'm going to grab the project option. So project include and then over to project. And I'm going to hover over the little dot that is the center of that construction circle. And I'll highlight red. And if I click on it, it turns purple and it tells me in my little project window that I've got one selected there. And then I'm going to say OK. Now, the only thing we need to do on this, we need to do 2 things, I guess. We need to draw a circle. So we're going to make our center diameter circle. And our center diameter circle is going to be right on that point that we projected over. So the center point of that center diameter circle is going to be right on that point that we projected. And we're going to make it the size that is material times 2. And then I'm going to hit enter. And then we just need to do our trick where we divide our circle in half, because we're going to need to revolve this again. So we need a dividing line that cuts it in 2. So I'm going to grab my line tool. A good, huh?
No.
Is it swearing at you? Oh, you got a big circle.
Yeah.
That's a yeah. There you go.
Sure you don't think this?
Yeah, times 2. And then we just have to divide our circle in half here. So I've got my line tool. Oh, I'll zoom in so we make this nice and big here on the screen. Might as well take advantage of all that screen real estate. I've got the little blue X. That's adding, telling me, hey, I'm going to add a coincident constraint. So I'm making this line, the end point of this line is going to be coincident on this circle here. And then if I move my mouse down, here I get the two other constraints I'm looking for. I get my horizontal vertical constraint, and I get my second coincident constraint. And now I can take this vertical line and give it one more coincident constraint that says, hey, it's got to be coincident on the center point of our circle. So, constraints, coincident. Here's this line.
The construction line
No, we actually want it to be a solid line.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because we actually do want it to divide our circle in half, because we're going to revolve right around this line. All right. And then I'm going to click Finish Sketch. And I'm going to kind of zoom out here. Oh, you know what? I made an error. Let's go back and edit that sketch. I was wrong about our size. Our size, our diameter of our circle, is not material thickness times 2. It's material thickness times 2 minus our offset. Because if this was the full material thickness, it would be tangent on the other side to the other side of our circle, and we want that minus. We want to shrink it in just a little bit by that offset amount. All right, cool. Cool? Sorry. All right, now we can say Finish Sketch. And now we can go up to our Create menu and choose to revolve this here fun circle into a sphere-like object, or a cutting object that is a sphere. So we're making a cut there, and you can kind of start to see what's happening there. It's lined up nicely on our other circles, which is cool. You can start to see it cutting away. And now from our Create menu, we can grab the Pattern tool again, our rectangular pattern. And we're going to make a pattern of features again. Rectangular pattern. The feature that we're going to make a pattern of is that very last revolve that we did. So there's our revolve, and then the axes that we're going to use are going to be those same axes from our sketch on the other side. And it'll let us just choose those as our lines that we're going to make our pattern in, even though they're not like, they don't really touch this object at all. They don't touch the feature, but it'll still let us use them as our lines there. And then again, we're making a distribution type of spacing. We're going to make it symmetric. And the distance is going to be our material times 2. Material times 2. And then I just need to turn up the quantity here to 5 again. actually, we need more this time around, because we actually need. Do we need 6? Maybe not. Maybe that's fine. You know, we can always add more later. That's the beautiful thing about the pattern tool down here, is it's super easy to edit. So I'm going to leave it at 5, and we'll see how that turns out. I'm going to turn on my, I've got that suppression checkbox checked, because I can turn off some of these that I don't want. I kind of want to see what it's going to do. Well, again, this is a nice thing about it being editable, but I think these ones that are really near the edge, that kind of overlap the edge, I think we're not going to want these. So anything that like sticks out over the edge, we're not going to want to use. So I'm going to suppress anything that pops out over the edge. And again, you know, this gives us a feature down in our feature timeline, so we can always come back and turn these back on. But if I say OK here, yeah, then that's starting to give me a pretty cool pattern. And I think that I like that with it. You know, from this side, it still looks pretty nice, even though our pattern kind of dies off here at the end. That doesn't really bother me. And on the other side, we can call this the back. I guess I don't like that as much. But again, I can come back over to my feature down here in my feature timeline. I could right click on it and I could say edit rectangular pattern, and I could try turning on some of these. Like I could turn on both of those and go, oh no, yeah, I definitely don't like it when it does that, when it cuts off the edge. I'd rather have them, none of them cut off the edge of whatever the shape is that we're making here, in my opinion. I like this better. And I'm going to say OK. And if I flip around to this side, this would not be a very good Apple knockoff if we didn't add some gratuitous chamfered edges. So we definitely are going to do that now, before we finish here. So I'm going to come up here to my modify menu and choose chamfer, and I'm going to pick these edges. I'm actually going to pick the edges on the other side too. So because this has to be a two-sided machining operation, we got to flip it over anyway, so we might as well chamfer both the edges. And I'm doing 0.05, but you can give it the amount of chamfer that makes you smile. And then I'm going to say okily dokily. Now we have 15 minutes left. Should we jump over to the machining side for our last 15 minutes? We won't be able to machine all these pockets, but we can do one of them. Machine a pocket? So,
Okay, Carl, could
yeah.
you cover the chamfer up?
Oh, yeah,
again?
yeah.
You got ahead of me.
I'm sorry.
And on the pattern, my computer was telling me to flake off and
Oh,
die.
ha.
So I had to stop and restart a couple
Yeah.
times.
You know, and yeah, So I added the chamfer just in the modify menu. I went and said, hey, add a chamfer.
On which side?
I added it on both sides. So I added it to the 6 edges on the top, I'm going to call it, and to the 6 edges on the bottom. So, because we got to flip it around anyway. So I figured I might as well add that chamfer all the way around. And I made it 0.05. 5 thousandths is like not a round number in imperial measurement. I don't know, but it seems like it looks pretty good. You know, you could do like 0.03 too, right? It just needs to break that edge, I think, a little bit. Just a slightly broken edge. Yeah, and there is indeed like a lot of geometry going on here. So it wouldn't surprise me if computers would slow down a little bit while you're doing this. Yeah, and then once you've gone around and selected all 12 edges, then you can say OK. And you know, before we go over to that machining area, let me let's mess with this a little bit. This is, like I said, in theory, parametric, right? So let's say, hey, I've got Apple does not use 1/2-inch stock to make the front of their Mac Pros or whatever. So if we come up to our modify and we come down to our change parameters thing here, let me make this smaller so we can kind of see what's going on while we do this at the same time. Because we actually don't need to say OK in the box before it does a thing. So our offset, if we change our offset, you know, if we just change it a little bit, we can see it update right away. So you can see the holes shrunk in size a little bit. So if we make our offset 0.05 or 0.15 instead of 0.125, those holes get smaller. If we make them 0.18, they get a little bit smaller. If we make our offset less than 1/8 of an inch, so like 0.1, so these things start to get pretty spindly, right? Because now we've only got 0.1 inches between like the tangent point of this circle to that face on the other side. So, you know, there's some dancing that you can do in like changing that offset to kind of dial in the look that you're going for, right? You can also just change this material right on the fly. So I could make this 1/4 of an inch instead of 1/2 of an inch, and you can see that changes it quite a bit. But it also changes this offset up. So the same offset, when it's half the thickness, needs to be less, which is kind of why we needed that second parameter there. You'll also need to add more pattern if you want to, you know, make it this thickness. But, you know, there's not a whole lot of meat left there. If this is a 1/4 inch piece of material, if I highlight that and look at this sideways view here, you can see how close that's getting. That's our 5/1000ths of an inch right there, thickness between the bottom of that circle and the other side. So it's kind of fun. You can push and pull these parameters around. We could have in our patterns here, edit rectangular pattern. I don't know how this would work with the suppression, but here we've got a quantity set. This could be a parameter if we wanted to, like this quantity of 5 in each. Since we're kind of driving the thickness of our material and the kind of the overall look with parameters, we could have a user parameter that is that quantity. So if I make a user parameter here and you want your user parameter to be the count or the sphere count, in order to use this expression as a quantity as opposed to a unit of number of inches, we have to change the units to no units. So if you don't have no units here, it won't let you use this sphere count as your quantity. You gotta have it set to no units. And then we could have both of our patterns could use this sphere count parameter. And you guys don't necessarily need to follow along. I just kind of wanted to illustrate that you can have this thing driven completely now by your user parameters. So now we don't need to edit anything when we want to change anything about this. I can change this to 10 and oh yeah, so I think the reason that it is making a weird pattern now is because we've got this suppression thing on. So it's suppressing in a pattern, which is kind of interesting. Or maybe these are the 3 that I had suppressed initially. So when I changed it, those 3 are still suppressed, but the others are not. So we do have to, we can turn off suppression. Does that work? Oh, it doesn't work.
I got this off that
Did it?
I had to switch mine to optimized.
Oh. Yeah, so for some reason it doesn't, when you turn suppression back on, it definitely wants you to come back and add these guys. So maybe with that suppression, it's hard to control things parametrically. I still have like a bunch of these things that are turned off. So I guess there is some editing that you would need to do when you go to change your material thickness and add a lot more of them or subtract a bunch of them. Because now there's a whole bunch over here that I gotta turn off if I want to make my pattern work out nicely. So still some manual work, but I'm going to do Command Z a couple of times here. Command Z, there we go, and then we get back to the thing that we drew. Cool. But we can also, here, I can change my size too, so, and change parameters. I can change my material thickness. I can go up to like 0.75, right? And again, same pattern, just a little bit different. Cool. Cool. There we go. I won't force like the rushed 15-minute cam thing. People love it when I do that. It doesn't do it justice. So eventually we'll get into cam, or like maybe I'll do like a weekend class or something like that that's more than an hour. Do like a 3-hour fusion intensive or something like that. If that sounds like fun to you, I'm sorry. Yeah. All right, cool. That is our project for the week. We will see you next time.
I saw this in